A nuke just went off at the Vatican, and Pope Francis pushed the button. Joining us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant correspondent Dr. Jules Gomez. So, Jules, let's talk about Saturday's appointment, the new head of the DDF. Tell us about that.
Pope Francis has indeed gone nuclear in the third and final phase of his pontificate, Rodney, and signaling this is his appointment of Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez, a heterodox and highly controversial prelate, to be the prefect of the Church's historic disciplinary and doctrinal watchdog. Now, Archbishop Fernandez, appointing Fernandez as prefect of the DDF, to change metaphors here for a moment, is Pope Francis appointing his pet fox to take charge of the Catholic hen house.
Yeah, so the Pope made claims about the past conduct of the dicastery. He alleged that it used, quote, immoral methods and focused on hunting down possible doctrinal errors. He said that was an obsession of the DDF in the past. So what does this say about Fernandez's new role?
Well, what has happened is something very unconventional. Pope Francis has written a personal letter to Fernandez, along with the appointment, instructing him what he should be doing, basically telling him that the days of the historic office of once upon a time known as the Inquisition, then the Holy Office, then the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, its role as a doctrinal watchdog, a doctrinal Rottweiler, is over. And now it is supposed to guard the faith, but not by condemning others. I suspect he's referring to the days when controversial theologians were silenced and censored, etc., etc. Now, this move, again, is very significant because this personal letter Francis refers to the, terrible days of the past where this office used immoral methods to enforce doctrine. Now, is he talking about, burning heretics at the stake, as happened in some cases during the Inquisition? Other people on the ground are saying, well, it could even be a reference to the days of Cardinal Ratzinger and then Cardinal Mueller as head of the DDF. And they came down, for example, if you remember, Rodney, they rapped people on the knuckles, particularly liberation theologians who had adopted a Marxist methodology to do theology. So this is what Francis has said in his letter, but nevertheless, he's made it very clear that he no longer wants the DDF to function as the doctrinal watchdog.
So Fernandez, he's well known for his heterodox theological opinions. Just how disastrous is this now that he's head of the DDF?
It's going to be difficult for me to express this in words because the magnitude is like 0.9 on the Richter scale. This is seismic. Rodney, a huge earthquake has gone off in Rome. Now, Fernandez was the ghostwriter of Pope Francis's most controversial apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, which virtually opens the doors to people living in adultery, public obstinate sinners receiving Holy Communion. And we know that Amoris Laetitia is now being used to promote same-sex blessings, etc., etc. I mean, it is not difficult to find Fernandez's heterodoxy, because he has written over 300 academic papers and books, many translated into other languages. And let me read some of his comments. So, for example, he argues, and this is critical, please remember, this is critical. His methodology strikes at the very heart of what is going to soon happen. So he says that the magisterium has flopped in the past. So, for example, it's reversed its teaching on slavery, later religious freedom and salvation outside the church at Vatican II. And these are precedents for Francis to create, and let me quote, irreversible novelty, even if it contradicts his predecessors. He goes on to say, this novelty invites us to recall that the church can really evolve, as has happened in history, both in our understanding of the doctrine and the application of its disciplinary consequences. But some have enormous difficulty in admitting that something similar can occur in questions related to sexuality. So, in effect, he's calling for a Copernican revolution in the Catholic Church's teaching on sexuality. And the methodology that he's using is, the church has changed its doctrine in the past, reversed it significantly. So why can't it do it now? And if it's not based on scripture or tradition, let's slap a bit of Newman on it and call it development of doctrine. And that is hugely sinister.
Yeah, I thought Vatican II was supposed to have not promoted any new doctrines. So that's kind of weird that Fernandez says that religious freedom has been changed. So apparently, to some people it has, and to some people it hasn't. The Archbishop, not only has he now sitting at the CDF, but he has been appointed as the president of the Pontifical Biblical Commission and head of the International Theological Commission. So given this horrific controversy surrounding his appointment, how do you think this is going to impact the works of these commissions?
Rodney, as a biblical scholar myself, I can tell you that one of the sources of my own discipline has been solid documents coming out from the Catholic International Biblical Commission. And I benefited greatly from it. But it's very important that people appointed to head this commission are proper biblical scholars, which means they have a doctorate in scripture, they have studied the original languages, etc., etc. And those are rigorous disciplines. Now, Fernandez has licentiate in theology with some sort of biblical specialization. I've looked at some of his biblical works and so-called works, and they are very weak exegetically. I mean, I'm afraid to say he actually distorts the Bible. Any biblical scholar will tell you that, honest biblical scholar. He even distorts Aquinas, but that is not my area. So people who are good scholars in the Catholic Biblical Association are going to be very upset that this person with virtually very little training in scripture has been appointed over this association.
So was he appointed before this? How long has he been part of these associations?
No, the appointment has taken place alongside his appointment to the DDF. That's what the Holy See Press Office tells us.
Okay. It seems like... it seems purposeful, that the way the church interprets scripture, in the manner of speaking, and the way the theology is interpreted, and then he's then put as the head of this dicastery. Very suspect. Now, of course, conservatives are really upset about this, but even progressives within the Catholic Church are criticizing this appointment. So what are your concerns, and what are their concerns about their elevation to this position?
We always knew that conservatives and traditionalists were going to attack the appointment of Archbishop Fernandez, and that is happening at large scale. Twitter is exploding with, rocket-propelled grenades fired at him. What we did expect is for progressives to come out against him, and Dr. Doris Reisinger, an academic, a liberal German academic who was once upon a time a nun. She was raped by a priest at the CDF. She's come out and she's accused Pope Francis of covering up his friends. She says Rupnik and Sanketa, and now you have Fernandez. And she's pointed out to, I think it was 2019 or earlier, when Fernandez repeatedly covered up a priest who was accused, Father Eduardo Lorenzo in Argentina, who was accused of abusing minors. He even attacked the victims and said that they were defaming the priest. He went all out in support of the priest, going to celebrate his ordination, renewal vows, mass. And finally, Father Lorenzo was convicted and he committed suicide a few hours after the judge found him guilty. 5 more victims, new victims, came up at the trial. Now, if he is appointed to the Vatican's disciplinary watchdog. This is both disciplinary and doctrinal. Remember, they get over 1,000 complaints, I think, just from one part of the world, Argentina or somewhere, every month on priests abusing minors. How is he going to respond to such abuse? And again, interestingly, Francis tells him in this letter, don't bother with, sex abuse clerical sex abuse of minors. We have other people in the dicastery taking care of that. Your job is to concentrate on, quote unquote, defending the faith.
Oh, yeah. So this really, and of course, critics and yourself and ourselves here, we're arguing that this is evidence of favoritism and that this is creating massive division. And of course, you were saying that that's what's happening on Twitter here. I don't know what's going to happen about this. What does this hold for the future for the church, at least the visible church?
Rodney, Mark Lambert, who's a very fine English blogger, faithful Catholic, he wrote saying that this stinks to high heaven of Francis's cronyism. And that is true, because what is happening is he's so insecure that he is consolidating his position by appointing cronies, people who are not particularly excellent in their respective fields. Again, this is what people are saying on the ground and on social media, but people who are mediocre and who will therefore say, your wish is my command, and do his bidding. But this is driving people away from the church, and they're beginning to see the cookie crumbling, as it were. And on Twitter now, there's conversation, and Facebook going on what are you going to do now? Are you going to leave the Catholic Church for Eastern Orthodoxy or the SSPX or the Lutherans or whatever? And this is very, very sad. And it's particularly significant that it has come about as a result of this appointment of Fernandez.
Yeah, I think Catholics scandalized by this just have to say what St. Peter said: "Lord, to whom else will we go?" That's all there is to it. So it's pretty clear that this is a disaster. And it remains to be seen just how the faithful and the church will manage these difficult times. Pray for the Pope, pray for Fernandez, pray for people scandalized by this. Jules, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you, Rodney.